Welcome to our podcast. I'm Dean Nixon with the, as always, lovely Kate Simmons.
Hey, everybody.
We are excited to get back into our podcasting. I'm chuckling because right before Kate hits record, she makes some reference to Game of Thrones I have no clue of, and I'm just sitting here going, I don't know if I've been insulted. I don't know. I'm not sure what happened.
I basically cast him into House Stark for everyone that is a fan of the show of the century. I threw that in there.
You did. Yeah. And so, well, we're excited to jump back into our podcasting tonight. Or today, I should say. It's daytime or night. It could be whenever you're listening, or morning. Hello. Last podcast, we spent a lot of time talking about pain and talking about how pain shapes us versus how comfort shapes us, and how inherently we as human beings are more leaning towards comfort than we are pain. That is an organic drive. It comes from this survival instinct that is a part of us, but it's also become an out of control part of who we are, in the sense that we've allowed it to dictate and to control in unhealthy ways.
Right. And so that was kind of the springboard into our discussion today in the topic, which is avoidance. And because inevitably, whenever you're trying to not feel the pain that you're in, then you're going to use an avoidance tactic in order to be able to do so.
Right.
Generally.
Right. And those avoidance techniques and those tactics. Wow, I struggle.
Technicians.
Technicians. With those avoidant behaviors and those avoidant things that we do, they start to become what we gravitate towards because they help us to avoid. Now, at the tail end of the last podcast, we were really talking about how we have learned to identify or define ourselves based upon sometimes the pain that we're experiencing. So if I'm having emotional pain, if I'm having emotional discomfort, I tend to believe I'm the only one experiencing it. That's because pain is a personal experience. Yes. That's because pain is an individual experience, and the levels of pain that you experience and the things that are more painful to you are different than other individuals. So,
right.
Of course,
even if you're going through the same painful experience, like if a family member dies, your entire family is going to be grieving that loss, right?
Right.
But everybody is going to be handling their loss and their grief so completely different. That's what makes grief very interesting to maneuver, because I don't know why I'm on a grief tangent about pain though, but because every loss is a different type of grief, and then you add all it's the thing that makes us the most fascinating as humans, right? Where there's such a rainbow of experience that can happen.
Yeah. Well, and I think the reason you are using, grieving is because it's something we can all relate to.
Absolutely. It is a human
It's something that we all experience. When we think about grief, we always think about the loss of a loved one. But really, we grieve over a lot of things.
Yeah.
A 5-year-old grieves over the fact that they don't get dessert because they didn't eat.
I do as well.
What was there left on their plate, and so we experience grief, and so that's something that we all can relate to, or the experience of loss. But yes, we all experience it in different ways, and a lot of that has to do to the level of attachment that we have to the things that we're grieving over, and that's one of the greatest expressions of love is grieving a loved one or the grief of loss of something. But sometimes we become overly connected to things that aren't healthy for us, and people that aren't healthy for us, or behaviors that aren't healthy for us. And we grieve over those things as well, which increases our emotional pain capacity, or diminishes our emotional pain capacity, and then it causes us to lean towards this other direction. So the point being in all of it is that leading into, I wanted to spend some time and really talk about the avoidant and the dependency and the addiction side of this comfort. Right. So I want to avoid emotional pain. Pain, in my mind, is an expression of failure. It's an expression of humiliation. It's an expression of doing something wrong, being wrong, whatever that negative thought or belief is in your mind that you have when it comes to experiencing pain. And some people are attracted to the pain because it feels like, oh, if I'm in pain, then, it means I'm doing something, or it's because I deserve it,
Right.
and it helps, me feel connected or alive or whatever. But I'm talking about when we start to get into this place where it becomes more than we can handle, and then we start to go down these other side roads, and we go down these other inroads of avoidance.
Yep, which we've broken down into kind of some different categories here. And then I think I also just want to let you know that at the end, we're going to shine some ray of hope, and the sunshine will come back as we're starting to talk about some of these
Well, you can out it right now.
kind of darker place. We're going to get you some coping skills.
Because that's the reality is a lot of times as we're talking and going forward, we're really talking about, well, what's the alternative?
Right.
So if the alternative is pain versus comfort, I'm going to take pain. I'm going to take comfort every time. And if you're sitting here telling me that comfort's wrong or bad, then I don't want to hear what you have to say.
Right.
Well, it's not a matter of you have to be in pain all the time. It's a matter of there is a level of coping that has to go on, and the coping skills. And we really are at this place in our world nowadays where we don't cope much anymore. We find ways to kind of cope. We think we're coping,
Right.
but as we call it so much in our industry, unhealthy coping skills that we develop. And so if I'm stressed out and I'm struggling and I'm not happy with my life, and I go home but I still have to function, I need to find something to help me cope. So I go home and I have a couple drinks. And that kind of takes the edge off. It gives me the ability to kind of cope and talk and relax, and then I can interact with the family and whatnot. And or maybe I'm in eating. I'm on my way home from work. I'm stressed out. I'm frustrated, and I swing by the drive-thru on the way home because I'm already hungry because I didn't take care of myself during the day, and so I kind of binge eat before I get home. And so I find these ways to avoid my emotions through these external coping skills that are unhealthy for me. Maybe it's people's drama. Maybe it's over-exercising. Maybe it's working and never going home.
Right.
And so there's all these ways that we avoid. And so, yes, we're going to talk a little bit about that and really get deep into that. And then we will, towards the end, be talking about the coping skills.
Right.
But I do want to lean into this avoidant idea for a minute.
Yeah, and Dean, I just want to back up to something that you said, which was awesome. To the listener, if you're thinking holy crap, if you're telling me I'm wrong or bad for avoiding pain, then I'm going to stop this podcast right here, right? Don't do that yet. Don't stop it yet, because what we're trying to open your eyes to see is that there may be a healthier way. There may be a way that is going to help you move forward along the path that you want to take your life down. And it's not necessarily that what you're doing is bad or wrong. It's just not working. It's not healthy. It's not creating the life that you really do want. It's keeping you stuck. It's holding you hostage, to be completely honest with you. And so as we go forward and we start talking about all these different areas that we get held hostage by avoidance and addiction, then then we're going to come right around and say, but don't worry, there's hope.
There is hope. And that's the part I think that I really want to emphasize as you say those things, Kate, because it really isn't a matter of people. We get to these extremes. We get to these all or nothing mentalities, right? We get to this all or nothing mentality. And in my mind, I think to myself, well, okay, if you're telling me that there's either comfort or pain, then, and there's no middle ground, or there's, we go to the extremes. Well, I'm going to go to the extreme of comfort, or I'm going to just have to suffer then. So you're telling me I have to suffer, and that's not the case either, because the middle ground is really coping skills and the ability to cope. And that's the part where we'll get to. But the avoidant part is the part that we have to really break down and understand. So why do we avoid? Why do we avoid the feelings and avoiding things that create discomfort in our lives? And yet, why do we not avoid some of the things that create discomfort and pain in our lives?
Like
our podcast prior, the relationship recycle.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Okay, right.
So we get into these certain things where externally we're getting a lot of feedback, and we become so overly connected to the external world as to what it's giving us messages and the things that we're interpreting and receiving and hearing from other people and thought processes, that we start to believe that life has to be our life. We start to believe that life is actually more real than the life we're living. So we start living outside of ourselves. We start living through social media. We start seeing people doing things and thinking to ourselves, well, geez, I mean, if they're doing that, then I should be able to do those things. And well, they look happy, so that must be the answer,
right,
is to do the things that they're doing. And so it's very confusing to us as human beings, because in our minds we're trying to figure out, well, if they're doing those things and it's making them happy, then I should do them. Then when we do them, it doesn't make us happy.
Right.
So then we think, well, what's wrong with us?
Exactly. It just pushes us farther down the what's wrong with me
right
rabbit hole.
So I see people do this. I see people that will avoid with, for example, they'll avoid with vacations. And they'll be like, golly, the Joneses, they're going on vacation, and their family looks so close and they look so happy, and
right,
we're really struggling here at home, and we haven't spoken for weeks, and the kids aren't happy, and et cetera, so I'm super unhappy with my life, so we need a vacation, because apparently that's the solution. So then the family goes and they go on a vacation, but what they don't show on the videos and on the pictures is the kids being on their phones, the arguments, the frustrations that are normal, typical parts of it.
Yes.
Not to say that it's all fake, but there's a whole part of normality that doesn't get shown.
Right.
And I think that's what I want you to hear me say that again, listener, is the normality doesn't get shown. And that's the part that we forget, is what we're looking at and what we're seeing. It used to be, when I was a kid, it was keeping up with the Joneses down the street. Like you would just see them packing up their ski boat to go to the lake, or packing up their ski equipment to go up onto the hill, up in the mountain, or go on vacation. And so back then, it was that concept, or piling into a new car,
right,
or
exactly,
surrounding, you're riding your bike down the street and you look in, they're all gathered around the brand new color TV. I'm really dating myself here. And, those nowadays, it's in our face social media wise.
Right.
But again, it's the normality, the normal part of life is what's not being viewed.
Right.
We're taking this window and we're making decisions about who we're supposed to be. Then when we try to do or duplicate what they're doing, we think we've added this whole backstory. To who they are.
Right.
And then what we do is we connect the dots by drawing a line, and that's what we do. The shortest is direct, drawing one line directly to another. We don't go through all the twists and turns and all the other things. We just go from A to B and think, well, that's it.
Yeah.
And so then we think to ourselves, well, they're happy because they have that new TV. They're happy because they're on vacation. They're happy because they're smoking weed. They're happy because they're partying. They're happy because they're
with that partner.
Or wearing those clothes, or they look that way. Their body looks that way.
Right.
Well, I will here to tell you, oh my gosh, people, get over it.
Yes.
The reality is nobody has a body that they are happy with, unfortunately. I very rarely do I find somebody that will sit down and go, I'm very, very comfortable with my body. And they may say it, I'm very comfortable with my body today. But that can change.
Moment by moment.
Moment by moment. And so that's where we got to get out of this, as we talked about it before. We've got this mind F that we're doing to ourselves. This misconceptions of the mind, where we are misconceiving what is real.
Right. Dean, isn't that so fascinating? How, like, you're sitting here talking about this, and I'm just like, in my mind and experience back in all of my PR classes while I was getting my degree in mass communications, right? It's the PR spin that you're talking about, right? So we're seeing that everyone is putting a PR spin on their life via the social media, so it all looks way better than the average norm, like you're talking about, is. But then also inside of us, and each and every one of us do this, inside of our own brain, we're then putting another PR spin on it, right? Like we're putting it through another filter, like you were just talking about the 2 points from A to B, right? The quickest line is the quickest way to get there is between the straight line. And our brains are really good at that. We're really good at like saying this plus this equals this, and this is the quickest way to get there. Like we've become developed in our intellectual abilities to be able to do that quickly, I think.
Right.
And I think that the fast pace of our world and everything else really has lent itself to that, right?
Right.
And so like this is like a double PR spin that we're doing to ourselves, is exactly like you were saying, like this basically torture that we're putting ourselves through in order to try to come up with that window, the way that we want to experience this world, to have this particular view. And then we get into, but I'm not having that, which is the point of the podcast today. So what is it that I need to do more or take more of or buy more of or work harder for in order to be able to have that? And that is like where our avoidance pieces come into that pain piece of, well, clearly I'm not enough. I don't have enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not smart enough, fast enough, pretty enough, whatever it is.
Not a good enough mom.
Right.
Not a good enough father, husband.
Yes.
Not a good enough son or daughter or brother or sister,
right.
or lover or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is. And we get into those different dynamics. And we move towards that avoidant behavior because I don't want to feel what I don't want to feel. So it's easier for me to disconnect and to numb out than to be who I am. And so I start going down this path of avoidant behaviors. I find things that numb me out, and they numb the pain, and they start to take that pain away, and then eventually that avoidance will become more, and that avoidance becomes something that we start to really lean into. And so we come home from work, and the first thing we think of is that thing that's going to make us feel better. Or we come home from school, or we come home from or we're home nowadays, with this those of you, if you've looked at the date on this, this is still during the corona crisis situation. And so there are a lot of people that are home. So maybe I'm just waking up and I'm still home. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, what's going to get me through the day? Because I don't have the coping skills. I don't have these coping skills that are moving me forward. And quite honestly, coping skills take effort. So I'd much rather lean towards or lean into something that really makes life numb, not quite numb enough because I have to keep chasing it.
Yeah.
But numb so I don't have to deal or I don't have to feel. And then, of course, I become dependent upon that avoidant behavior. Whatever that avoidant behavior is, then I've got to lean into that. And I see that happening a lot with people that are food addictions, pornography addictions, tobacco addictions, vape addictions, media, social media, gaming, all these different things that are expressing themselves, sex, work, exercise, anything and everything. All of a sudden these addictions start to really rise up, and they start to dominate our world, and they dominate what's going on. Here's where I get mad.
Oh, I'm so excited. I literally just gripped the arms on my chair.
Yes,
like,
you did.
So excited.
I was there.
I love it when Dean gets mad.
Here's where I get mad. The way I get mad is the people that exploit that. It frustrates me. It's been going on since the dawn of time, an exploitation of. And the reality is that there are so many levels of exploitation, and everybody's got their pet peeves, right?
Yep.
And I'm not going to get into all the different levels of exploitations, but the one that really bothers me to the point where it just burns me and gets me on fire is this idea of selling the normality of avoidance and addiction. And when it starts gets played as normal, and it starts getting crammed down people's throat as this is normal.
Right.
So, case in point, the NFL, one of the biggest issues that the NFL has had, and I've had the privy of working with NFL players, I've had the privilege of speaking for the NFLPA, and the one thing that I keep hearing with all of the NFL, the past NFL players, is there's a huge addiction issue in the NFL. And back in the day, not very long ago, there was a room, and you would go into it, and I'm not outing anybody, this is common knowledge, but there's a room. Prior to a game, you walk in, if you have an ache, a pain, if you're not pumped up enough, if you're too pumped, you need to calm down. Whatever it is, that pharmacy is open. Because the show must go on.
Right, yes.
And so all of a sudden you get these individuals that are so amped up and so erratic, and you wonder why some of the players' behavior is so erratic on the sideline, people. Well, there you go. and the reality of it is, so all of a sudden these individuals that are participating in these things, once they get out of the NFL, the room's not there anymore. But the dependency is there. The avoidance is there.
Right.
And even, per se, the addiction.
Yeah.
And so now what happens is these things start to become normalized, where media is making money off of these things. The world's making money off these things. They've been monetized and capitalized to the point where, well, here we are. It's 2020. Get over it. Everybody's doing it.
Right.
And that just burns my shorts, because the reality is you're taking avoidance, addiction, and dependency, avoidance, dependency, and addiction, and you're feeding the fire. You're not solving the problem.
Right. And I would even say it's not even making it normalized. It's glamorizing it.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's putting a sparkle to it.
Nowadays, with the whole marijuana controversy, I've been in this marijuana debate, and that's why I love the podcast, because I get to say what I want to say. and you can just tune me out, turn me off, never listen to me again. But the reality is I've been for 30 years in the debate over marijuana. I've had kids 30 years ago sitting down with me saying the same rhetoric that I hear from kids today. Same rhetoric. I'm like, God, your grandpa said those things to me. Calm down.
As a teenager.
As a teenager, I know.
That's what you led with.
I know. That's the
Dean
reality.
has found the fountain of youth.
That's the reality. But the point being is that the addiction piece of it is where I take issue. And when we normalize things, whether it be marijuana, whether it be alcohol, whether it be pornography or food, and we normalize these behaviors and we market them and we monetize them and we exploit them without solving.
Right.
Right? And that's what people will say, well, marijuana is healthy, marijuana is natural. Well, so is alcohol. Right? Alcohol, yes, it's a fermentation process. It comes from the earth. Come on, people. We can make an argument out of anything.
PR spin it, Dean.
But the reality of it is here's my final say. This is my mic drop moment, is if it helps you avoid your emotions, then it's unhealthy. I don't care what it is. It's unhealthy.
Right.
So, argument over, right? So if you're using marijuana recreationally, if you're using alcohol recreationally, and you're doing those things, hey, I'm not here preaching on that topic. What I am preaching on, and the drum that I am beating, is the avoidance, the dependency, and the addiction drum.
Right.
And there are a lot of individuals out there that can't function by just smoking a joint occasionally.
Right.
They can't function with just having a drink occasionally. They can't function with just having cheesecake occasionally. They can't function with checking Pornhub occasionally. There are those of us out in the world, wherever we are, that struggle with everything, struggle with something that we have to learn the skills and the techniques to overcome.
Right. Yeah, and I love that you brought that piece into it, Dean, because it's not that we're saying like, marijuana is the downfall of society, right? No, the downfall is because you're avoiding what you're feeling and you're doing it in such a way that creates a whole different swirl down your life path, and then all of a sudden you're dependent on it. And that is very, very different than the recreation, like you were talking about, like maybe having a celebratory drink at someone's wedding, right?
Right.
Like that is very, very different than I'm going to come home and I'm going to have like 3 shots in order to be able to like recover from my day and make it through the rest of my night.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's, I get people that are coming in and saying to me, I use marijuana because it helps me calm down, or I use marijuana because I can't overcome my anxiety. So I use it because, and this is the argument is I use it because it's better and cheaper than the drugs that my doctor are going to put me on to deal with my depression or to deal with my anxiety. And that always concerns me because there's no regulation over marijuana. So when you're smoking marijuana, you cannot control the dosage of THC that you're consuming. Where at least in a prescription medication, you're getting, 4 milligrams or 4, micrograms or whatever it is that you're getting of those doses. Where when you're using some of these, like with alcohol, it's like nobody's prescribing alcohol to help you deal with your anxiety. And that's why they're never going to prescribe marijuana to deal with your anxiety is because there's no real treatment around it. And I think that's where people need to kind of wrap their heads around is treatment means that I'm taking anti-anxiety pills, I'm taking antidepressant pills coupled with therapy and coupled with working on myself emotionally to develop coping skills so eventually I can remove the medication.
Correct. Yes.
That's treatment. But when I'm just drinking to take the edge off, when I'm just eating to take the edge off, if I'm just smoking to take the edge off, there's no treatment surrounding that. And that's where people need to get clear. Like, wake up. This is not the same thing. But they come in, and this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand is eventually that marijuana isn't going to work. Eventually you're going to start having anxiety. And this is reported to me a lot where the marijuana is not working anymore because now the marijuana is causing anxiety even. And that's just a common theme.
Right.
And the problem with that is that now what's going to happen is I see a lot of people, they'll go now to the doctor and then they'll get the prescription. And then they'll do the prescription and the marijuana. And so or they'll go and get the prescription and drink. Or they'll go and get the prescription and they'll still eat. And so we're still not moving forward. We're still not solving problems.
Yeah, and I think that you just brought up a huge key piece to this, Dean, as to it's really critical to figure out, I just realized I wasn't talking to my mic, I was looking at you, the why, right? Like, that's what I'm hearing you say. Why is it that I am choosing to do this behavior, right? Why is it that I'm choosing to smoke marijuana so that my anxiety can lessen? Okay, great. Why am I choosing marijuana? Well, it's more natural and it's cheap. You know what I mean? Like that why is going to really help uncover what it is that you're trying to avoid, the pain that you don't want to feel, and then be able to help you figure out a healthier solution to that, to be able to uncover that why. Because I think a lot of times as humans, we just, either we're already so deep into it that it's just like we're addicted, or it's so habitual that that we don't even really remember the why anymore. Right? Like it's like, this is just what I do. This is my life. This is how I make it through each and every day. But to be able to really become self-aware and really take some time to sit with yourself in your mind and in your heart and in your spirit and decide, okay, wait a minute. What do I really want in my life? What are the things that are potentially holding me back? Where are my addictive behaviors? All these, and this is some really, really cool, empowering pieces too. And I hope that if you do take a look at these pieces in your life, that you do it with this idea of discovering the why, really in a more, okay, so get curious about it, right? Like in more of a discovery, going after some hidden prize inside of you, right? Like, look at it like a game, not with judgment and shame and guilt, because that is always something that we're going to preach. We are just going to stay right away from the unhealthy things of that, right? However, if you can uncover the thing, the why that you started, down your path with whatever it is, like we've just talked about 20 different things. And I don't know, I'm kind of the believer that just about anything can be turned into an avoidance tactic, therefore also an addiction. Right? Literally anything.
Absolutely.
And so being able to really zero in on that why is going to be able to help you figure out those next steps into finding a different path. And I'm not going to like paint it with some beautiful rose-colored glasses. This is it's a journey not for the weak of heart, for sure. Like it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of faith and trust in yourself, and then really looking for the what that you want to create, I think, is also a huge next piece. I just went on a giant why tangent.
Which is great. Yes, I love it, because I usually do most of the talking. I love it when you do. And it is that piece of the why, and we've got to connect to what is it that I am emotionally avoiding? What is the discomfort, and why am I connected to the discomfort? As you said, it's the why. Right. So why am I feeling anxiety? Not what can I do to get rid of my anxiety? That's where the world is today. The world today is, how do I get rid of my anxiety? Well, here's some spinners. Remember those? Yes. And so they were giving these kids spinners, teachers out there listening to this. The fidgets or whatever. The teachers out there know exactly. I have drawers full of them still. I'm confident. But, it's like, no, I want my kid to have that.
Specifically, they were for, like, to help with ADHD.
That's what they say.
Yeah,
that's
which
what they
it
say.
Totally
That's like not
hilarious.
A tool. But parents would get frustrated, and they're like, yes, I want my child to have this because they can focus and concentrate and, et cetera, and all these things. And the reality is we're not asking the question of, well, what is the emotion that's causing the anxiety? What is the emotion that's causing the boredom? What is the emotion that's causing the hurt, the anger, the fear? What's really underneath all of this? And am I coping with that? Am I taking those coping things or coping skills and coping tools and really moving myself forward? Because, and I agree with you 100%. Why?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? And as if somebody's out there listening to the podcast and they're thinking, "Oh gosh, I'm deep. I'm already in it, dude. I'm in it. I'm using food every day, and it's my drug of choice, and I can't stop. And I McDonald's, like they have like a tab running for me or whatever it is. We get into this space and we think, well, it's too late, or how do I get out? Well, the way that you get out is simple. It's one step at a time.
Yes.
It's one step at a time. And we recognize that if I start building a house, I'm going to start with a sledgehammer, right? Because the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pounding stakes into the dirt to set my forms to pour my concrete.
Okay.
Right? So I've got to start with that sledgehammer, and I've got to start with a shovel, and that's how I'm going to start. But I don't use a sledgehammer and a shovel to put in my trim. I don't use a sledgehammer and a shovel to put in the sink and the light fixtures. I have to switch my tools.
Right.
I've got to switch to the tools that are where I am now. And if your tool right now...
That was a really, really good analogy, Dean.
Oh, well, thank you.
I really liked it.
Thank you.
We've been working together for a while now. I've not heard of this one, so I'm really digging it. Keep going.
I'm glad I have some surprises left, I guess. But if right now my tool is, alcohol, or my tool is marijuana, or my tool is food, or my tool is work or shopping or whatever it is, okay, don't judge yourself for it.
No.
Just look at it what it is.
Yep.
But
just
now
look at it honestly.
Look at it honestly. But now it's time to upgrade your tools. Now you've got to move to the next level. And I think that's where people fall down, is they think, well, this is what I do. And so we can fall into the addiction part. And that's where some of you that might be in the addictive piece, where now it's time to get help. Now go in and sit down with a provider or a professional and let them help you. Let them help you find the next tool.
Right.
And if it's an avoidance or a dependency, then it may be something that you can work on your own, or you may want help.
Right.
And you can get help from therapists or coaches like us, etc. But the piece is the key ultimately is that you've got to upgrade that toolkit and that tool belt so that you're not just using a sledgehammer trying to put roof tiles on your house. And it's like, well, God, I don't know. They just keep shattering and sliding off the roof. They won't stay on, And for those of you that aren't out west here, we have, roof tiles, kind of those back east with tar and gravel shingles. It's different, but still the analogy works, I guess. You're not going to put those shingles on with a sledgehammer is my point.
Yeah.
But it's
what
about...
kind of roof do they have in Australia, Dean?
It depends on what part of Australia you're in. Some of them are tin, I guess, and aluminum. I don't know.
I love it.
Why would I know?
Because you're like, in the West, these are our tiles. And in the East, in
I'm
Europe,
talking about-
this is how it goes. They have grass on their thatched cottages.
That's probably true. I don't know. I can't debate whether
really
you're
like your vast knowledge on roofing. It's making me smile.
Sorry, my background's in construction. So, but the point being is we've got to become aware of how to move ourselves forward, and a lot of it's got to be in the sense that I have to start using the coping skills. And those coping skills, and we've talked about them in our webisodes that we do. They're on our YouTube videos. They're in our Facebook videos. The book, The Key, for those of you that like to read, you can go on Amazon Prime. You can type in Dean Nixon, and it will come up. The Key it's called. It's a story that is written about a young man who is coming out of recovery and going through a process of learning the 8 essential coping skills. And I know I don't want to get too deep into the coping skills today. We're kind of on the backside, and there's so many other opportunities. I really encourage you to go to our YouTube videos, and I really encourage you to buy the book. But really the answer is learning to cope, to add these different tools so that we don't keep leaning on the same tools that aren't working. The other thing I really wanted to add is it's imperative that you recognize the role that media and money is playing in our staying connected to this unhealthy behavior.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And really, once again, just looking at it honestly, right? Like, if you think that there is somebody that's just giving you lots of good information about a product that they have, then I'm sorry that you need to wake up about that just a little bit. Like, everyone is trying to get a sell. It's not about, hey, this is actually a really great product. It's like, hey, buy my product over somebody else, right? So really just getting educated in all of those things, that will probably be a completely different podcast. But I agree, Dean. I think that not only looking at ourselves honestly and why it is that we do what we do, and if it is avoidant and if it is addictive, or if we are addicted to it and have become dependent upon it, but then also looking at the sources that we're getting our information from and deciding what their agenda is. Because most likely their agenda isn't to improve all the qualities of your life. Their agenda is to sell you a product.
Right. Yeah, I remember, and again, I'm going to date myself. I remember the movie Risky Business. Did you ever hear of this one?
Oh, yeah. Tom Cruise, right?
Tom Cruise, right? It's got the famous, him sliding in his socks, and underwear. And I remember watching that as a younger, as a young man, and it looked exciting to me. It looked attractive to me, that life that he was living. And all of those things made me think to myself, well, my life is fairly frustrating. I'm going through a lot of things that I'm not really happy with. I'm not comfortable with who I am. I'm not comfortable in my own skin. But here are these people participating in these unhealthy behaviors, and they seem to become more and more comfortable in their own skin. They seem to become more and more happy, and more happy than I am. And it's because they're doing these things.
Right.
And And that's so interesting to me to think as I look back at my mind back then. And then I project that into the world that we live in today. And I watch, these videos and these things where athletes and celebrities are portraying their non-reality. They're not portraying reality. They're portraying their non-reality, and it looks exciting and it looks enticing. And all of a sudden people are thinking, well, that's what will make me happy. And that's what success is. And, I get so frustrated with the way that music has taken vulgarity that I would have considered vulgarity as a kid. And they're words that I'm not going to say that I didn't cuss when I was a kid. I cussed. But using the N word and using the B word towards women never came out of my mouth back then, because that's how I was raised. My mother raised me that those are things very early on, and I'm grateful to my mother who was very, very delicate about those things. We never made any, I was never allowed to say things about people's gender preferences. And I remember one time I was using a word towards that, and she came out and I was in trouble. I mean, I was in trouble. I didn't even know what the word meant. But she told me what the word meant, and I never used it again because that's how I was raised. And now I'm listening to media where people are throwing these verbs and this verbiage out, these words, and they're saying them in music, they're saying them in songs, they're saying them in movies, as though they're funny, as though they're okay, as though they're romantic. And then certain people have certain privileges to say them, but other people don't have privileges to say them. And it's like, well, wait a minute, this is still not okay. And so this is where this misconception of the mind starts to come. This is where the mind F starts, because we start to believe that those things are going to bring us happiness, those things are going to bring us joy. But ultimately, people, they're just trying to sell you something.
Yep.
They're trying to sell you a movie. They're trying to sell you a song that you'll buy. They're trying to sell you an album. They're trying to sell you something to eat, something to wear, something to do. That's what they're doing. And it's not bringing you joy. You know it. If you're listening to me, you know that those things aren't bringing joy to your life. What brings you joy to your life is those moments where you're standing and your socks are off and you're standing in the grass and you're feeling it and you smell the grass and you feel the sun on your face, or maybe you're listening to the waves crash and the sand, and those are the things that bring you joy, is being in the now.
Yes. Or if you do endure and try something different and cope, and then you have a major breakthrough in your life.
Right.
Like, that is what brings you joy.
Those are the things that bring you joy.
Yes. Yeah.
But all of this other stuff, this excessive stuff that we're buying into, because the media is money driven and media is trying to teach you or tell you something, that to me is where the mind misconception of the mind stuff happen. And that's why we're unhappy, is because we're trying to participate in these things because we think the picture in our mind is going to make us happy, rather than being in the moment, not in our mind, but in the moment. And that's, I think, a great segue. I mean, because I really want to talk about the mindfulness movement and where that's taking us.
I love it.
And, as we move into our next podcast, I really want to talk about that mindfulness movement and the significance of it. But prior to that, I really just want to loop back, is really, people, it's coping, the ability to cope.
Yes. I think, and then why don't we just go ahead and throw at the very end here, Dean, and heal, right? Because the truth is that as you can really look at yourself with honesty and find all these places and start to get new tools in your tool belt and move forward, then you're going to uncover those places that cause you the most pain and be able to heal them. And then be able to continue to move forward to the next thing and the next thing as you just walk your way up your own mountain, and eventually you're going to have the most beautiful view that you'll remember, right?
Right.
You're not going to have some substance that's going to have fogged you over from that, or some other behavior, right? So, and by the way, this is not a super quick fix. It's just not. Anything worth having takes a little bit of energy and effort to get to, right? So keep on the path, keep being human. We just love you. And I don't know where to go from that, because I'm just like, just do it. We love you.
Do it. We love you. It is. It's about being in those moments, and it is about being able to be grounded in who you are. And as you heal, because what we know is hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And if we really want to heal the world, if we want the world to stop having violence and these horrible things that have happened in our world, especially recently, where people are acting out towards other people in forms of violence, which is a mental health issue more than anything. We have to start healing ourselves, and so it's the walking wounded that are the ones that are going out and hurting other people.
Yep.
And so we've got to mentor it, we've got to teach it, we've got to address it, and that's why these podcasts are happening. That's why our webisodes are happening. That's why we're doing what we're doing, as you said, because we care.
Yep, we do.
So next podcast, I really want to dive a little bit more into the mindfulness idea of things, and how it helps us, and kind of break that down and really go from there. So
That's
I'll let you sign us off. How's that?
Well, have a wonderful week. Hope that you can get real honest with yourself and learn to love yourself in all of your madness and humanity, and also the person sitting next to you. So we'll see you next week, guys.
All right. Thank you.